Hi, I'm Evan Bailey, and I'm the Vice President of Disco Donnie Presents. Today I'll be talking a little bit about one of our festivals called Ubbi Dubbi, which is located in Ennis, Texas. Ubbi Dubbi started, about 3 years ago as sort of the brainstorm of Donnie Estopinal, our CEO, Disco Donnie. He came to us with the concept for the name, which I guess was a nod to a PBS show called Zoom that he used to watch when he was a kid. And Ubbi Dubbi was the language that was spoken on the TV show, which is a little bit like Pig Latin, that was used amongst the characters on the show to talk to each other in ways that the parents couldn't understand. So Donnie liked the ethos of that name, and we kind of started to work around the brand from that name. When we first approached a lot of artists and their management and agent teams about the name, there were obviously a lot of questions. In fact, to this day, people still mispronounce the name Ubbi Dubbi and things of that nature. In terms of the creative process behind the name, we had a brainstorm with our friends at Universal Music Group at the time, and who are our social agency, and we kind of tried to develop a narrative for it. We knew we liked a few things, like for instance, we liked the idea of making characters that were sort of cartoon-like for the brand. We knew we wanted them to use the language or something similar to it. And we basically developed these two different characters, Ubbi and Dubbi, who represent kind of like the different tastes people have within the music scene. So, for instance, Dubbi is very interested in bass music and those sorts of things, more aggressive music. He's a bit of a younger, sort of enthusiastic character, whereas Ubbi is more interested in things like house and techno, and has been around for a while and kind of knows the ropes. Ubbi Dubbi happens annually in the spring. It's Dallas's springtime festival event. We usually hold it like the last weekend of April. It's located in a town called Ennis, Texas, which is, about 45 minutes or so southeast of Dallas. So it's sort of out in the country. It's held at the Texas Raceway, which is kind of like a racing facility that has a lot of space and a great staff there who we love working with. So it's a pretty big festival grounds that we're able to work with. The site, because it's so big, it's allowed us to do a couple things we wouldn't normally do. For instance, we can do camping there. Racing events typically have a camping component, and Ubbi Dubbi is the same way. So we're able to utilize some of those areas for camping. Additionally, since it's out in the country, we can be a little louder, which is nice. Sometimes when you're in a metropolitan area, you have to be a little more conscious of those sort of things. We were pretty fortunate the first year at that space, which was in 2021, that really there were no major sound complaints related to the event. In terms of like the different types of artists that play Ubbi Dubbi, it's all different types. We're always looking for the artist that's sort of coming up and to try to help them grow their profile alongside the profile of the festival. So it's kind of a win-win for both the artist and the festival when an artist, grows in their stature, even throughout the timeline of the promotional cycle of the festival. Of course, the main stage is sort of house and bigger acts and those sort of things. We also have a bass stage, which, is extremely popular, with a lot of different bass and sort of darker sounds on it, as well as sort of a techno area. typically, with a camping festival, we also have an activation, like a stage out in camping where people can enjoy music late night. This year we had all sorts of stuff. We had artists like Adventure Club there. We had, artists like Mark Farina and Dirk Harder tag teaming there. So a little bit of everything, hopefully, for everyone. In terms of the first act I ever booked, this was before I started working at Disco. I've been at Disco for, nearly 20 years. But when I first started producing events, one of the first events I ever worked on was with some friends from Cleveland, Ohio, where I live. And the event we produced together, we booked a lot of the artists who are very well known in the Midwest at that time. So people like Terry Mullen and Terrence Parker, and of course the legendary Scott Henry of the East Coast. That was kind of the first event I ever worked on. It ended up being pretty successful, a few thousand people. It was tons of fun. In terms of the most memorable parts of Ubbi Dubbi, this was literally the first, festival after the end of the pandemic. We took a lot of risks throwing the event and took a lot of precautions to ensure its safety. But one thing I'll never forget was just the sort of feeling of joy from so many different people, whether it was fans, staff, artists. The energy was really palpable, and I'll never forget at the end of the event, I was sitting there watching, I think it was Griffin and Millennium kind of close things out, and I was sitting there with some of the agents and managers and those sort of things, and everybody was just kind of looking at each other in disbelief, like we just pulled this off. The music industry is sort of back, and it was something I'll never forget and extremely memorable. I guess, a little bit about the target audience for the festival. Ubbi Dubbi's held in Texas, so we're looking at fans from all over Texas. One of the great things about Texas is people will drive extremely far, all the way up to things like 8 hours. So you see fans from the Rio Grande Valley, of course, Dallas, Houston, Austin, even as far as places like Denver, Oklahoma City, El Paso, New Orleans, basically anywhere in the South, within driving range. The typical, I guess, audience member for Ubbi Dubbi is, anybody from like 18 to 35. I would say the majority of the audience kind of fits into that demo. A lot of Texas people, as I mentioned. In recent years, I've noticed the crowd's getting a little bit older, which is kind of nice because you tend to see people, enjoying themselves a little bit more safely, and just more interested in higher end experiences, those sorts of things. Some things that are unique about the festival. Ubbi Dubbi obviously has a really interesting storyline, so we always like to have a lot of fun with it in the promotional cycle. So even before the event, we're trying to develop storylines for these different characters and developing new characters. We've sort of developed this whole universe of different characters around the event. This year, in fact, we introduced a new character called Cubby, and she's our first female character. Very interesting, kind of the patron saint of doing good. So we wanted to kind of, accomplish a couple things, increase character diversity, but also, use these characters as methods and tools to talk about things that are important, whether it be the environment, health and safety, consent, etc. Some other things that make it unique, it's a camping festival. If you've never been to Texas, it's a very unique place and has a lot of its own kind of style and flair. And I think to enjoy that with Texans and others, in a camping environment's one thing that kind of makes it unique. There's not typically too many of those. I guess, a little bit about the challenges we faced when we were planning Ubbi Dubbi. I mean, this was, as I mentioned, the first festival after the pandemic, so it was extremely stressful, mostly because everything was changing. So, the health and safety concerns related to the festival were constantly changing. For example, things like our knowledge of the virus of COVID-19. Both the legal kind of political environment in which the festival existed was changing rapidly. So one of the big challenges was just the state of flux. You were kind of changing your health and safety plans on a dime based on new executive orders and those sorts of things. And we had to partner with a lot of different companies and technologies to kind of pull off a safe event. We had everything from on-site staff testing there to, health and safety questionnaires to COVID detection beagles, a lot of different communication channels going to whether it be artists or fans, etc. So it was, something we were very proud of, but it was also very stressful to produce, especially in a short timeline. To be completely honest, we weren't even sure if we could produce the event in, say, February, and by March we kind of had the go-ahead. So we sort of had a month to build this new model for events post-pandemic, and that was extremely challenging. I guess some other things you may not, know about me or Disco. As I said, I'm the eldest employee at Disco Donnie Presents. I met Donnie here in Ohio, where I live, right after Hurricane Katrina. He was obviously he was a promoter in Columbus, Ohio, and I live in Cleveland, and that's kind of how we met. And I guess I've been with him ever since. So he's a great guy, loyal guy, and very innovative and interesting promoter. So I just wanted to thank you guys for having me today, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into Ubbi Dubbi. Thanks.